I want to show you a fascinating exchange between Brendan O'Neill and Melanie Phillips. And I want you to listen carefully, not just to what they say, but to what it reveals. Because what they're really describing in this conversation is something much bigger than Israel, much bigger than this war. They're really talking about a collapse in how the West fundamentally understands right and wrong. And after you watch this, I'm going to come back and I'll explain why I don't think that this is actually confusion. They speak about it as a kind of confusion, but I think it's something much more serious. Before we get to the video, please help out our campaign. Go to Israel 365 Charity, Israel365charity.com, and click on the Israel Under Fire ribbon at the top of the page, the banner at the top of the page, or scroll down to the current projects and help with the war campaign. It's the first campaign listed there. We're helping out many, many families on the Israeli home front who've been affected in all kinds of ways by what has been happening with Iran over the course of these last few weeks. There are many needs on the ground, and social services are stretched thin, and this is a good time. It's the time where we need you to step up and help out. So go to Israel365charity.com. We're plugged into a lot of the best charities that have their finger on the pulse of the needs, and your dollar will really go to people who need it, especially with Passover only about a week away. Many more needs at home. So please help out. Israel365charity.com. All right, let's get right to Melanie Phillips and Brendan O'Neill. Here we go.
It's not surprising, but it remains shocking, doesn't it, that we can have pretty high numbers in the Western world who are openly expressing support for the Islamic Republic against the West.
Yeah, it's not just in Britain. It's happening in other countries too, other parts of the West, particularly those with liberal leftist administrations, Canada, Australia, and parts of America, New York, for example. But this has been going on, as you say, for a very long time, and it is really difficult to understand. One can only begin to understand it by acknowledging what's happened in the education system for the last half century, in which 2, 3, 4 generations of kids have grown up and become adults and have begun to teach kids who've grown up and become adults that the West is evil and racist and white and colonialist and oppressive, and that nothing it does is good, and that anything that the developing world does, which is bad, is good. It can't do anything bad, and so on and so forth. And so you have to see it through that prism before you even start. And then you have the wall-to-wall, I was going to say media narrative, but it's more than a media narrative. It's both the media in the West, backed by the entire international humanitarian establishment of international law, rooted in the United Nations, expressed through transnational courts, the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, and through the great NGOs. I mean, by great, I mean enormous. Oxfam, War on Want, Save the Children, Human Rights Watch, and all those people, and the whole tribe of international lawyers. For the last 2-3 decades, this entire establishment, which purports to represent peace and justice, at the heart of which is the UN, peace and justice in the world, and has come to become a kind of almost religion. It stands for conscience in the progressive classes who want to do good, and they think that everything, therefore, that this humanitarian establishment says must be right and true and good and just and moral. And that entire establishment has, for various reasons to do with the politicization of international law and all that, it has turned viciously and venomously against Israel. I mean, the United Nations has been in bed with Hamas, with the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization that not only sets out to exterminate Israel, that is fueled by venomous anti-Semitism of the most medieval and Nazi kind, and has been, caught supporting Hamas in Gaza. So many of its UNRWA people have been, have been Hamas operatives and teaching hatred and so on. Now, if you have a situation in which the kind of moral compass of the West, its conscience, is set according to evil, not good, then you have a situation which, in fact, we've been living through, in which everything is turned upside down. Good is bad and bad is good. Victim is aggressor and aggressor is victim. Justice is injustice and vice versa. And that's kind of the prism through which you have to see this madness that erupted over the war in Gaza, in fact, before the war in Gaza, on October the 7th, while Israelis were still being slaughtered in southern Israel by Hamas-led Palestinian Arabs from Gaza. You had immediately ecstatic demonstrations that Israel was about to be brought down and the West was going to be brought down as a result. So you had that madness erupting on October 7, 2023. And now, scroll on, we have a new iteration of the madness over the war in Iran. And so if you've been following this, as you and I have, aghast, with our hearts in our mouths and our spirits in our boots, looking at the destruction of the West's moral compass, you're not surprised, but it's still, as you've just said, extremely shocking.
One thing that happened on 7th of October, alongside all the things you've just mentioned there, is that the wife of the future mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, his wife Rama Douaji, she was liking posts that celebrated what was happening in Israel. She was giving a heart, which is what you do on Instagram. She was giving a heart to images of Hamas's invasion, the collapse of the fence, people sitting on top of an IDF tank and so on. My initial response when I saw these reports, I'm sure you've seen them as well, is that, well, maybe she didn't understand how awful it was on that day. But no, because months later, in 2024, she was liking posts that denied Hamas's sexual crimes against the women of southern Israel. I found it very difficult to communicate to people just how serious it is that the mayor of New York is married to a woman who would like, let's be honest about it, who would give a heart to the worst mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. That's what we're talking about here. What have you made of that story? What do you think that tells us about, not only about Mamdani in New York, but I guess that new politics that is creeping up in the Western world?
Well, it's monstrous. I mean, she is monstrous. He is monstrous. He has the same views. He thinks that Israel should not exist. He has said so. He may purport to like Jews, but he only likes the kind of Jews who hate other Jews and who hate Israel and want to destroy Israel. And so he uses Jews to divide the Jewish community of New York. I'm afraid to say many of whom voted for him, because this is another topic, maybe, but, about 3/4 of American Jews are liberally and left-wingly inclined, and they voted for him in great number. Whether they're having buyer's remorse now, I'm not sure. But it is a monstrous situation. These people are monsters. They support monsters. They support people who not only slaughter, but rape and torture in a most sadistic way Israelis on October 7, 2023, and would do the same again. And it's like a psychopathy. And it's not just them. I mean, I'm looking at the faces and behavior of people in Britain and in the equivalent demonstrations in Australia, in Canada, and you see the same contorted hatred of Jews. And you think, well, what's going through their minds? Why do they hate Jews? Most of them have never met a Jew. They don't know anything about Judaism. They know nothing about the Middle East, nothing about Israel. But they have been taught that this is what passes for conscience. They observe that their entire peer group thinks this. And it's like the madness of crowds. It's the herd. you follow the herd.
Okay. So here's my take on this. What you just heard from Melanie Phillips, I think a lot of people feel this, but don't quite know how to articulate. Because she's describing a kind of moral inversion, right? A world in which good is called evil, evil's called good. That's what she said. A world in which Israel's the aggressor, Hamas, or now Iran, is treated as somehow justified. And she calls it a collapse or a break in the West's moral compass. But I want to push that one step further, because I don't think that the West has lost its moral compass. I think it has actually replaced its moral compass. And I think that distinction matters, because what we're seeing today is not, I don't think these people are confused, people on the other side. Like the way Brendan and Melanie were talking, they make it sound like that this is a kind of confusion. But I don't think that's what it is. I don't think they're just getting things wrong. I think they have a completely different moral framework. The old framework was that you judged people by their actions. You distinguished between civilization and barbarism, and one was objectively better, between those who build and those who are out to destroy. Okay, the new framework doesn't work that way. In the new framework, everything is about power. If you're perceived as strong, you're guilty. If you're perceived as weak, you're innocent, no matter what you do. And I've made videos on this channel. I should come back to this topic again. That this is a commonality between Islam and Marxism, which is that it's all about power. Okay, because Islam is about dominance and submission, and about power, and about honor and offense, right? Very similar to like political correctness. It's all about being offended or honor. It's meaning how you feel. If you feel disrespected, that has value, right? There's a real similarity here. But again, to sum up, in this new moral compass, because I believe the moral compass has been replaced. There is a moral compass here. It's if you're strong, you're guilty. If you're perceived as weak, you're innocent, no matter what you do. And once you understand that, then a lot of other things start to make sense. That's why people could celebrate on October 7th while Israelis were still being slaughtered, because in that framework, Israel's strong and therefore it's guilty, and the attackers are weak and therefore they're justified, right? They're not confused. You understand? There's a certain consistency here to how they think. Now, Melanie Phillips talks about the education system, and she's absolutely right. For decades now, generations have been taught that the West is uniquely evil, that it's colonialist, that it's racist, that it's oppressive. But I would take it even further. See, they haven't just been taught that the West is wrong. They've been taught that the truth itself is suspect, right? That you can't really define anything. I talked about this in an earlier video where I showed this debate between Konstantin Kissin and Destiny, right? That nothing can really be defined. Nothing can really be judged. Everything is narrative and perspective and power, right? And feelings, right? If you can't define anything, then you can't defend anything. You can't defend your country. You can't defend your civilization. You can't even defend the idea that your civilization should exist. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out. Now, there was another point she made that I think is absolutely critical. She talked about this entire humanitarian establishment, right? The UN, the NGOs, the international courts, and how it has become almost like a religion. And that's exactly right, right? This is the new moral authority in the West. People don't think things through for themselves. They defer. If the UN says it, it must be true. That's a certain authority, right? The UN said. If Human Rights Watch says it, it must be true. It must be moral. If some international court says it, it must be just. It must, that's the law. But what happens when that entire system is corrupt? When the entire system gets it wrong because it's based on wrong assumptions, right? What happens when that entire system has been captured by a specific political agenda? Then your entire moral compass isn't actually broken. It's a wrong moral compass. It's pointing in the wrong direction, something that Dennis Prager said in a speech that also I did a video about a few weeks ago. And this brings us to Israel, because Israel is not the cause of this confusion. Okay, Israel is just the test case that brought it out into the open, right? If Israel, fighting enemies who openly call for genocide of Jews, for the destruction of the state of Israel, if Israel's the villain, then what that means is that the system itself is broken. Or let's be more accurate. Maybe the system itself is working exactly as designed with a wrong moral compass, a moral compass that has replaced the correct moral compass. That's why the reaction to October 7th was so important, because it was spontaneous, right? It was everything was exposed. What was exposed after October 7th was not born on October 7th. It was all there. The groundwork for that had been laid for decades. You didn't have to wait for investigations or reports or narratives. People immediately knew who they wanted to blame. That's why she talked about the anti-Israel demonstrations began right away on October 7th. Right? That's what tells you everything. Now, one more point that she made that I think is worth sharpening. Melanie was talking about the madness of the crowds, the herd mentality. And that's true, but it's not the whole story, because this isn't some sort of hysterical reaction, right? There's also an incentive structure that's built into this, especially on social media, because people gain status, they gain followers, they gain belonging and identity by adopting these positions, these nihilistic, leftist, Marxist, anti-Israel, anti-West positions. It actually gains them status, right? And in this day and age, you don't need to understand the Middle East. You don't need to know anything about Israel or Hamas or Iran. You just need to signal that you're on the right side. And that's why you see people chanting things they don't understand, river, sea, supporting causes they've never studied. They hate people they've never met, right? They don't know anything. It's not about that. It's not about knowledge. It's about being a part of the right camp. Which brings us to a bigger picture, right? There's a lot of talk about whether the West is finished. I talk about it a lot, whether countries like the UK have lost their way irretrievably. Now, I'd like to, again, redefine it. It's not that it's finished at this point. It will be finished. At this point, I would describe it as hollowed out. It's still there. There's a shell. Because a civilization that doesn't have an identity anymore, that has lost its way, it doesn't really know what it is. It doesn't believe it has the right to defend itself or the ability to defend itself. That's a civilization that is in serious, serious trouble. It's not dead yet, right? But it's going that way. And here's the part that should really concern us. This is far beyond a cultural issue. It's also a strategic one. Like a look down range. Look at where the world's going. Our enemies understand what's happening to the West. They know it very well. They watch it with glee. Iran understands it. Hamas understands it. They know that the Muslim Brotherhood understands it. They know this. They know that they don't need to defeat the West outright. They just need to play the long game, right? Prolonging conflicts, escalating, and let the West's own moral confusion do the rest. The moral relativism always comes back to save the wicked actors. The evil guys always benefit from the moral confusion of the West, right? We see this over and over again. This is where it ties into what I've been saying about wars and victory. Because for decades, the West has had this pattern, right? We fight wars, but we don't finish them. Right? We confront evil, but we don't defeat evil. We don't take it all the way to the end. Because we prefer to negotiate, we prefer to compromise. We see those things as virtuous. That's what we prefer. And we leave the bad actors in place. But now we've taken it one step further. We're not just stopping short of victory. We're no longer even sure who the good guys are, right? Because we have this moral relativism, this broken compass, this incorrect compass. Right? We don't know, again, we don't know who's good and who's evil. And if you can't determine that, if you can't with confidence say, we're the good guys, they are evil, and we need to destroy them. You hear me say this all the time. That's a simple conviction that we're on the side of good and the people we're fighting are evil, and it is the responsibility of good people to defeat evil. Very simple. But it's not so simple, because it takes conviction that you are on the right side. And that's what the West has lost. Because if you can't answer the question about who the good guys are, you're not going to win anything. That should be eminently clear. Anyway, that's my take on Melanie Phillips. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found it interesting, helpful. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you think. And thank you for growing the channel. And please spread the word. God bless.